Top Game with your host, Sammy Castro. Episode 16, Elizabeth Castro, Sink House. More than an educator, translator, or a diplomat, she was the drum major at her high school in Galveston, Texas, which is how she first caught the eye of her Marine husband, yours truly. A lifetime of service to others has grounded her through exposure to many different walks of life, innovative ideas, and a global perspective. Breast cancer survivor, leader, and an avid reader, Liz is also a wine lover, folklorico dancer, and mother of 2 Juchitero sons. You can find her on beaches from the Pacific to the Caribbean with sand between her toes, organizing events for military families, or snapping photos while on vacation so she can later post them on social media for everyone to see. Admin note, at the request of the guest, never mind. She'll tell you who she'd like you to support. Hey, I know it's been a minute. I took a little break, went on hiatus, but I got some heavy hitter interviews already in the can. I'll get them out to you as soon as possible. Thanks for tuning in.
I can hear you, like in my head.
Well, yeah, I can hear you. You can hear me in your head. Stop moving the mic.
So bossy.
Yeah, I'm bossy. Man, we're redlining, and I don't know why.
What?
I said we're redlining, and I don't know why.
It's redlining.
It looks as though our levels are too high, but it doesn't.
When you say levels are too high, what does that mean?
It's for the audio.
Did you move the mic back then?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Are you recording already?
Nope.
It's not loud right now, is it?
No, no, but that playback was loud.
So the playback hasn't been compressed and optimized and all that.
Are you recording already?
No, you want a different chair?
Switch the chair with the arms. Yeah.
Here. Sit down, look pretty.
I get in the chair.
That's what I didn't want. I didn't want you dragging the chair across the floor.
Why?
Because then I have to go back and take that out later.
I asked you if you were recording. You said no.
I'm not. Really. Sit down.
A mess.
You're a mess. A hot mess.
Yep.
So, I wanted to start off by reading you something. A love letter to Liz.
Gonna make me cry. Can't take that out.
I haven't started. I don't tell you enough how much you mean to me. I don't do the little things as often as I should. Too often I'm not actively listening when I should be. You're crying already? I'm not even one paragraph in. Although it may at times seem as though I take you for granted, you mean the world to me. There's no one on this earth who understands me like you do. No one challenges me as you do. Your influence and presence makes me a better man, a better father, a better Marine. Hopefully, this letter can serve to remind you I recognize how truly precious you are to me and that my life would be hollow without your presence. I'm occasionally reminded when we disagree how determined you can be to have things your way. One memory that comes back to me often is that had you not been so determined, I may have lost you to breast cancer. I sat in the waiting room at MD Anderson for 16 hours, attempting to visualize what I would do if this surgery was not successful. I still don't know how to take your attempts to persuade me to remarry. Who in her right mind would have put up with the boys and I, knowing all along she would forever be in your shadow? We've been through some tough times between the deployments, the moves, and everything else this crazy life in the Marine Corps has thrown at us. I couldn't do it without you. I'm sorry that you've been forced to constantly adjust to the curveballs. I'm sorry that my career in uniform has taken a toll on yours in education. You put so much into our family that I sometimes worry about what it cost you in terms of the goals, hopes, and dreams you were cultivating when we met. At every turn, when presented with a challenge or dilemma, you've always made the best of it. It's been magical to witness. Our sons have that spark of yours. I see them as they enter unfamiliar territory, undaunted, full of confidence, and armed with your mischievous twinkle. They truly believe there is nothing beyond their reach. They owe that all to you. I have a confession.
You have a confession bear meme to go with it?
I don't have a confession bear meme. I have a confession. There's a reason I didn't kiss you on our first date, and is not what I've led you believe all these years. I know my story up to now has been that I was trying to play hard to get by keeping you guessing and off balance. That is not the truth. As we were standing on the pier that night on Galveston Island, surrounded by choppy water and salt air, looking into one another's eyes, I was afraid. I was frightened at the prospect that I would fail to measure up to become the kind of man you deserved. I knew in my heart I was still a child, and standing there before me, in my arms, was a beautiful woman. I choked. Thankfully, I didn't give up and rose to the challenge. And for reasons I can't explain, my pager continued to flash your number along with the appendix 143. I survived meeting your family, and I'm still embarrassed by the fact my mother genuinely wanted to understand what you see in me. I married up, and the funny part is that wasn't the plan. Prior to leaving for boot camp, a good friend asked me, "What about Miss Lopez? How are you not going to marry that woman?" I didn't have a good answer other than I didn't think either of us were ready to start a family. All those letters we exchanged over those 13 weeks in boot camp convinced me otherwise. When I called at Thanksgiving to ask you to marry me, I knew you'd say yes. I felt on top of the world as a Phase 4 recruit. You still make me feel that way to this day. It's the little things you do that spark those emotions. It's the smell of the kitchen when I come home and you've been cooking up love and affection for the boys and I. It's the way you pop one heel up when you're engrossed by a book or some task. It's the way you give the children you teach, all of you, when they're in your classroom. It's in how you put everyone else's needs ahead of your own. Angel, there's one last thing I need to apologize for. Although I am grateful to Megan for nominating you as the Military Spouse of the Year, I regret that I wasn't the one to nominate you. It speaks to how I can sometimes take you for granted. I want you to hear me say this out loud. With your charisma, leadership, and compassion, you have been the architect of our family's traditions, values, and culture. You've made a home for our sons and I wherever your 2 feet are planted. For that and countless other small gestures, you are already a winner. As I went through and read your responses to the questions, I couldn't help but think of how far we've come since the day we set out together to drive cross country from Galveston, Texas to Monterey, California. And now all these years later, we're here in Okinawa, Japan, and you're still willing to try new things. I still can't believe you finally got on the mats with the boys and I today. I love you, Angel. I don't tell you that enough. Sammy.
Yep, I knew it was going to make me cry.
Is that a good cry or a bad cry?
A good cry. A good cry.
Can I get you to get closer to the mic?
Yeah.
You okay?
A good cry. Yeah, I'm okay.
What do you think?
It's beautiful.
It's been a while since we wrote letters to each other. I can't think of the last time I wrote you a love note. Not like that.
Well, because we didn't have instant messenger and WhatsApp and text messaging back then. We didn't, did we?
No. I had a pager. I had a beeper.
We didn't have, so that's why we wrote letters for a while. Because, I mean, our first cell phones we had were those Nokias.
Those Nokia brick phones. Yeah.
You couldn't text on those. I don't remember. I don't think so.
I think we could text on those.
I don't remember.
I have to look that up.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
So this is kind of a two-parter. I wanted to start off with that, to lead off with that for several reasons. First, because like I said, I don't do it enough. But also because when I last interviewed, one of my last interviews, which I still haven't released yet, was a good friend of ours, Vince Quinteros, who is still convinced to this day that Vicente is named after him.
Yeah.
So I let him keep that, depending on who's present. But his question to me on the end of that interview was, "Who's going to interview you?" And I tried to weasel out of it by stating that I'm kind of in every interview, every episode.
Yep.
But him knowing me wasn't satisfied with that, and it was he that brought it up, if I'm not mistaken, that you'd probably be the best person to interview me. So
Reluctantly.
What's that?
I said reluctantly.
Reluctantly, yeah. So here we go.
So what do you want to talk about?
Talk about whatever. There's no rules. It's Top Game. I don't have any advertisers or anything like that. We can say whatever we want.
I'd like to go back to when you went to enlist. But, I mean, out of all the things you could have done, you never really were quite clear why. I was at your mom's house and you came home and you said, I figured out what I'm going to do. But like it came out of the blue. You never talked about it because we dated for about a little over a year when you did that.
Yep.
And you just, I mean, there was no mention of it before you enlisted.
So I think it was several things. I was struggling with mediocrity. I understood that I had a lot of potential and talent that was unrealized. I didn't have the discipline to buckle down in school, but I had the self-awareness to understand that. And we had some scares, and in those scares, one of the things that came out was you were unsure whether I was prepared to really start a life with you. And that was earth-shattering. And it required me to do some introspection. And then there was the other aspect that Emiliano was getting ready to leave, and he and I were tight. And I also had this sense that something was coming. I didn't know what it was going to be, but in 1999, we were due. And a part of me wanted to be a part of that. And that's also one of the reasons why I wasn't sure if what me enlisting in the Marine Corps was going to mean for us. And so when I did go to boot camp, we left things unspoken.
Yes, we did. I remember all of my coworkers, my bilingual ESL teachers that I worked with. You can't just let him go without marrying him first. I remember saying, I can't make him propose.
You would have just said yes if I'd have proposed?
I think it would have depended on the proposal.
What does that
I would have said yes.
What does that even mean?
Well, I mean, I don't know. How would you have proposed? Like, what would have been your plan? Like, how would you? Because you proposed from a phone in boot camp.
From a phone bank at MCRD San Diego.
With him yelling at you that you only had him.
But he wasn't yelling at me.
I mean, you didn't have that much time to talk.
I didn't have time to talk, but.
So that was a proposal.
So when that happened, Gunny Crane had I guess identified or it was understood that I was going to graduate as a Lance Corporal in my blues, and for him, and I don't know if this is something that just he did or if all general instructors were doing it at the time, but at that time, you know, unlike now, not every Marine got issued his blues, except for the honorman. And he wanted me to not have the regular brass. He wanted me to have anodized brass. So for the Thanksgiving holiday, he took me over to the uniform shop and he bought me my anodized brass. And then on the way back, he asked me, it was just him and I, just the two of us, him and his guide. And he asked me, he said, you want to make a phone call? And I was like, fuck yeah. So.
But you didn't know you were going to propose on that phone call.
I didn't know I was going to get a phone call.
But you had already thought about proposing? I
had thought about it. But I mean, you know, when's the last time we gone back and read those letters? But you still have them in the shoebox?
They're still in the shoebox.
Do we have them here? Did you put them in storage?
No, I think they're in storage. Because I didn't want to. I don't think I brought them with me because I didn't want them to get lost so they're in storage. Actually, I think I put some stuff at my mom's house that I really didn't want to get lost. I think she might have the shoebox. Mm-hmm. They're still in the same shoebox from almost 20 years ago. So what would have been your proposal if you had not had to?
I was trying to wiggle out of that.
I know what you're trying to do.
I tried to take it on a tangent to wiggle out of it.
See, Vince was right in having me interview you.
Beat you, Vince. I don't know. I mean, maybe dinner at Clary's.
That sounds about right with Mr. Melbourne.
Yeah, I would have I'd have had Dexter and Dwayne and Doug and the rest of the crew kind of helped me put together something special. Tanya and Mr. Milburn.
Where would you have put the ring? And the buttermilk crab casserole. That was my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that would have been the answer. I mean, that is where we had our reception, our first one.
Our first one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always wondered about that. I always wondered, how would you have proposed if you were not in boot camp and given that phone call? And were you sure I was going to say yes?
It could have been on boot leave, maybe.
Yeah.
I was sure you were going to say yes. I was the only guy getting, 2 or 3 letters a day.
Yeah, because I was teaching 4th grade, and the kids were preparing for the writing exam that year. So we wrote first thing in the morning. We wrote during writer's workshop, and then we wrote at the end of the day. So when the kids were writing, I would write a quick letter to you, and then I'd send them up, put the stamp on it, and I'd send it up to the front office to the U.S. mail slot, because it had like a little basket for U.S. mail, and then it had a separate basket for like inter-school mail. But yeah, 2-3 times a day, kid would run up to the front office and drop off the letter.
Yeah, so when we do mail call, they just scream out, "Guide." I'd come up and get mail received. I serve. And then, "Guide," and I come back up. And the other recruits are looking around like damn. Because sometimes it would get backed up and it would come in droves. And I'd have to figure out, like, chronologically which order to read them in.
I didn't think about numbering them.
Yeah.
That would have been... And now if you open up the box, they're not, I don't think they're in any kind of order.
No, they're not.
Mm-mm.
We'd have to piece them together. Yeah.
The teachers are like, if you got to do something to make sure he doesn't get away.
I didn't get away.
No, you did not. And here we are.
So let's reverse roles. Looking at your responses, one of the key things that you talk about is spouse employment as one of the key issues facing the military families. But I don't know if you've gotten into the heart of the situation with just your written response. So I kind of want to kind of gloss over your response, read that over, and then give you kind of an opportunity to kind of clarify. So in there you say, in your opinion, what is one of the most important issues facing military families? Spousal employment is a key issue that has a significant impact upon more than just the financial health of our military families. There's no small amount of frustration when a certified health professional is struggling to meet the minimum requirements for clinical practice and there are no positions available in the immediate vicinity of a new duty station. Career educator spouses also face obstacles to employment due to lack of teaching, certification, and reciprocity. These are just 2 examples, but the majority of our junior military spouses are earning less than their civilian counterparts, according to multiple surveys taken by veterans' rights groups. Conservatively, we are unemployed at around 16%, which is 4 times the national average, all while being in our prime working years when we should ideally be preparing for retirement. There are a few intangibles. I'm lying. I'm making a liar out of myself because I think you're hitting all the wickets. There are a few intangible incentives for employers to hire military spouses. There's significant room for improvement in creating federal employment opportunities. The portability of professional licenses, credentials from state to state requires federal oversight. Reimbursements and tax credits for licenses, credentials merit legitimate exploration. During my time working with Blue Star families, this issue has been very close to home. I had the opportunity to meet with many young spouses who shared their experiences and frustrations with me on a personal level. Military family stability is being negatively impacted, and if left unchecked, can have unforeseen implications. What implications? Let's start there.
Well, I think my response touches on facts and data, but I don't think it gets down to the heart of the matter, because you have, it affects the military family financially. It's a huge impact, but it doesn't talk about the impact on, I would say, the military spouses, the emotional impact, the morale impact of that spouse, especially, and there's two parts. You've got the young military spouse, right out of high school, that marries their high school sweetheart that joins the service. So they're just starting out in their life together. Him as, or her as a military active duty person. Then you have the spouse that hasn't really quite figured out what they want to do in life, but here they're uprooted, and then they're put into a situation where everything's new and unknown, and they're still trying to find themselves. They start school up, start taking credits, start taking classes, and then get orders. And you're uprooted again, and you go to another location, and you try to enroll. Oh, well, those courses don't count here. And you kind of have to start over. They lose something. So it's kind of frustrating. It's kind of like they take 2 steps forward, but then they, when they move, it's like 3 steps back. So you've got that spouse, and then they get frustrated, discouraged, and they kind of tend to give up. And a lot of times, some of them start having families, start having kids.
But they don't all give up.
No, they don't all give up, but they give up, and then they may move and then start over again. But it's not like your traditional graduate from high school, you go to college or vocational school, and you have a beginning, you have an end. It's disrupted and interrupted, and there's that. And then you have the spouse that has a career, like me. When we got married, I was teaching, already working on my master's degree.
You'd already finished your master's degree when we got married.
That's right. When we got married, I had already had my master's degree, so I had a plan. I did. I had a plan, and then
what was that plan?
The plan was, I thought I was going to live and teach and eventually become a school administrator in Galveston and live my life in Galveston. No idea that I would be on the other side of the world today, But, and that right there can be also kind of, how can I say this? Depressing, because you have a plan and you move, and you move to a new state or a new country, and you stay and you're trying to figure out how the system works. What does for me, my teaching certification, I didn't know anything about any of this. How does that work? So when you go to apply, they're like, well, you need to turn in your teaching certification from Texas, and we have to see if it's compatible to our one in California. That was our first move. And in my mind, I was like, what do you mean it's compatible? I thought it's a teaching certification. I mean, if I'm certified in Texas, why would I not be certified in California? And so I learned that each state has a different requirement. And so they look at your transcripts, they look at the courses you take, they look at every last detail, and then they have the powers to be determine if your certification meets their standard. And you have to take a test. So in California, I had to take the praxis exam. And I had to do this all on really short notice because we were moving there soon. So there's a lot of parts that had to fall in place for that. And I remember they told me, well, we will give you a probationary California license. And you have, I think it was like 3 or 4 years, X amount of years to take these courses on your own dime, and then submit for a permanent professional California teaching license. And
did you get permanently certified in California?
no, because we weren't there long enough. You were there for language school at the DLI, and we weren't going to be there 3 or 4 years. Well, that was the plan, not to be there 3 or 4 years.
Well, yeah.
So I wasn't too worried about it, but I remember the courses being like history of California and another class. I guess they wanted me to know more about their state. And that kind of makes sense because you're teaching their kids, but we were only in California 2.5 years. So then we were able to, I left before that. I had to meet that requirement, but just taking that praxis test, that's money out of your pocket. And then if we had been there longer than 2.5 years, I would have had to take those college courses. You're out of pocket for that. And they do have reciprocity states. Certain states do with other states, but they'll say, yeah, we'll give you a temporary, but you still have to go through all of these hoops.
Right.
And that's frustrating. And then you move overseas and there's lack of employment overseas. You're fortunate here in Okinawa that there's Dodea schools, but not every military installation has DOD schools. So that part was fortunate, but even then, they don't sometimes certify you in everything that you're certified in your state.
Are you willing to dive a little bit into Dodea schools? Or you want to kind of leave that one alone?
I think we're going to leave that one alone.
Okay.
The certification process is definitely different. But when we first went to Lejeune, we're from Galveston. Like I told you, my plan was to stay there. I had never explored or researched teaching outside of the island. I loved my island. I still do. If I could go back, I would. But
Mardi Gras kicking off right now.
yes. But so I guess I was naive and ignorant of everything that was out there. I had no idea that there was Dodea schools worldwide, that we had DOD schools on military base, because my family, nobody in my family had ever experienced that. We rooted ourselves in Galveston and in Texas, and that's where we were. So I didn't know when we moved to Lejeune, and I interviewed for Onslow County Schools, and then someone said, oh, you need to interview for the schools on base. And I remember thinking, well, there's schools on base? What do you mean there's schools on base? And I thought, no, you have to, they pay more. They told me. And we had just bought a house. Well, you had just bought a house and I didn't have a job. And I was really panicked. And we had Enrique. And I was like, we have to pay for this house. I was really freaking out. So they said they pay more money. And I said, okay, well, we just bought a house. I guess I should probably apply for where they pay more money. And I remember that was my first introduction to DOD schools. And those 5 years at Brewster Middle School were amazing. That was for me a very positive experience with DODs. I had a fabulous team that I worked with. Most of them were military spouses, so they got it. It was right there, built-in support network.
Miss Mitchell, Mr. Shaw, Mr.
Miss
Mangini.
Chastain, Rhea, Julie, Anita.
Ray is going to punch me for not saying her name first.
And admin, my administration was amazing. Great mentors. It was just a great place.
Do you think that having that amount of either spouses or retired or former active duty military on the staff at the school is a benefit to the military dependent children?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because it's a different population. And the needs are different than like in Galveston.
Right.
You know, it was a very, very positive experience. And so, and it was real. I remember, I just referred to as real teaching. You were given, coming from Texas where it was very demanding. Here it was like free reign. Here are the standards. How you teach them, what you do with it is up to you. And for me, that was just mind blowing. And that was my first introduction to DODS. And I didn't really get into the weeds of DODS and how it worked, and still didn't realize that there was schools overseas. That just because you were gone all the time, so it was just me and Enrique, and it was basically in survival mode. You know, just raising a busy 2-3-year-old and the dog in the house, and I didn't really get into the politics, you know, that, and you'd hear them talking about the teachers union and the transfer rounds, but I didn't really pay attention to any of that. I think it was just really naive and I was just trying to survive and make it through those 5 years we were there. You know, now looking back, I'm thinking, wow, maybe I should have paid attention. Maybe I should have asked questions about transferring out and transferring to a different country, and maybe becoming the sponsor and you becoming the dependent. But at that time, that wasn't the plan. The plan was, I'm going to do my 20 and get out. So I didn't look outside of that.
There's not a lot of Marines that when they come in say, I'm going to do my 20. But like a few days into boot camp, and I knew I wanted to do a career out of this.
You had fun in boot camp. That's not normal.
I was old enough at 23 to realize that it was a game.
Yeah.
And there were rules. There wasn't a lot of... there was some deviation from the rules, but not a lot. And if you could play the game, you'd do all right.
Yeah.
And, one of the takeaways that I got out of that was that you weren't expected to be the strongest, the fastest, the smartest, but you had to be well-rounded. You had to find that balance. And learning that at a formative age, or at that formative stage of development as a young leader, right? Because from pretty much day 10 or whatever it was when they made me the guide, I was in charge. That was the objective, was being able to walk the walk, to talk the talk, and look out for your subordinates. I just put up the stats right now because it's been a while since I looked at them.
For what?
For the podcast. We're over, even though I've only released 15 episodes, real episodes. I don't count episode 0. were about 7,000 downloads. And the top one to this day is the one that I had with Derry Cross and his wife Joyce at their dinner table.
Yeah. But I didn't finish answering your question.
Okay.
The impact, and I think that it doesn't, I think you kind of, it's real easy for a spouse to feel like they've lost themselves or their identity, because you're just you're moving every 3 years or every 2 years, and you kind of have to reinvent and recreate yourself wherever you go.
So I think what's worked for us is we put down roots.
Yeah, because and we figured that out real quick. You get involved and you definitely can't sit at home for sure. But I've had those times where I have sat at home.
You didn't sit at home.
Well, no, but there have been times it's hard because even as a teacher,
even when you weren't working, like before you got hired in the Dominican Republic, you were running the streets.
Yeah, but I think I had a different outlook on life after breast cancer.
Okay.
I saw things differently, You
kind of got hired almost immediately in San Angelo. Now that I think about it.
No, because remember, I flew out from Jacksonville, North Carolina to San Angelo for 1 day. They were supposed to have a job fair in San Angelo. And you were supposed to go with the resume, and it was supposed to be like I think it was supposed to be like at a gymnasium in one of the schools. And all the schools who were looking for teachers were going to have tables there, and you would go in and introduce yourself and give them a resume. And then I guess if they wanted to interview you, they could. So that was the plan. But I remember when I flew out and I got to San Angelo that right before I flew out, they said, we're not doing the fair. We're going to do scheduled interviews with all the administrators that are looking for teachers. So you're going to be in a conference room with like 10 to 12 people, and they're going to all interview you at the same time and at the district office. I said, okay. And they gave me time to be there. So I remember I flew into San Angelo, got in late that night, went to the San Angelo district office.
It's like a teacher's version of the NFL Combine.
So I was really nervous because I didn't know what to expect. All my interviews had been one-on-one with the school principal and the assistant principal, or sometimes maybe a panel of just a few teachers. Every school does it different. And I remember I walked into this conference room, and there's this huge conference table full of administrators and central office administrators as well. And I remember immediately thinking, oh shit, what the hell have I just walked into? It was very intimidating. And they all introduced themselves, but even though they all introduced themselves, it was still like a blur, because you're still in shock thinking, oh my God, all these people are going to ask me questions. And they did. Every single last one of them. I think the interview lasted for about an hour.
It's like a murder board.
Huh?
It's like a murder board.
Yes. So then I remember I went back to Gilfil Air Force Base because I was staying at their TLF there. And I was packing up my suitcase because I was flying out that very afternoon. And they called me, Human Resources, and said, Ms. Castro, we have a job offer for you, 5th grade math at Goliad Elementary. Do you want it? And I was like, yes. She's like, well, can you come by and sign your contract? And I said, yes. So I went over there, signed my contract, and then went straight to the airport from there and came back. So I had a job. So I think it's easier if you land somewhere and you already have a job, because that stress is taken away. But still yet, as a teacher, I came into a team that was very well established. And it's kind of like like a little family, and you're kind of like an outsider every time as a teacher coming into a school, because they have their family, their routines. They know each other, how everybody works, and you kind of have to. And it's funny because I say this, you kind of have to sit back and watch and figure out who's who in the zoo when you come in as a teacher, and just observe till you figure out how their little system works, because every school is different. Their culture is different. And whereas maybe you've held certain leadership positions in your previous school, you're coming in at the bottom of the totem pole, and you kind of have to earn the other teacher's respect to a certain extent, because you're an outsider, kind of. And I don't think the teachers mean to treat you that way. I just think it's that they're like, we've been here 30 years. Some teachers have been there 30 years. Not just talking about Dodea schools or Dodd schools, public schools. They've been there 30 years. They're probably there when the first brick was being laid for that school, So for them, that's their school, and you're coming into their school. So you kind of have to have a certain level of respect for those staff teachers, because they've been there, They've probably been through 10 administrators in those 30 years, So you kind of have to sit back and watch and observe. And then when you feel it's the time to make your room to move yourself into a leadership role or speak your mind, because you have those schools. Well, we've always done it this way. Or it's, and not just in a school, it can be in any job. Nursing, you could have a nursing team, and you come in and that nursing team already has their system working, and you're coming in and you want to change something. Well, who are you to come in and change something?
Right.
That's hard. And if early on, I was not as wise, I was full of energy and full of ideas and suggestions, and I would come in and say, I think we should probably do this. And you get looked at like, who are you? You haven't earned, the right to come in and start changing things around here. That's hard. You have to, like I said, you have to reinvent yourself. You have to starting over again. And then as soon as you get in and they start listening to you and you start earning their respect, boom, you get orders. And you got to figure out how you're going to start over.
And I guess the difference for us is that everybody in the Marine Corps gets orders on a, periodic basis. So that turnover is normal. And, if you're stationed at, say, 2nd Radio Battalion, RA, America's Rabin, and you get orders to, San Angelo, there might be guys there that you already knew. For us, when we checked in San Angelo, I knew the Nick Watsons and the Sarah Clarks and, a bunch of people already that I've been with them in the schoolhouse before in a training environment, or had been deployed with them, or we'd been stationed together out at Camp Lejeune and all that. And so, and particularly with the 2600 field being a small, almost insulated community, kind of everybody know you're one or two, degrees out from each other, and your reputation, good, bad, or ugly, precedes you, and
you can build on that. And with a military spouse, and I can only speak as an educator. My master's is in educational leadership, to be an admin. Well, you kind of have to be in a certain school or district or organization for a while for them to get to know you as an educator, know how, what kind of teacher you are, kind of leader you are. And like I said, it takes a while to come in and jump into those leadership positions in the school. And then by the time you get to that point where the staff knows you, your district knows you, central office knows you and knows your name, just around the time that they're like, oh, wow, Ms. Castro could possibly be a great administrator or a great, specialist. We have to move. So then it's like starting all over again when you get to the new school district because nobody knows you. It's not like you just come in you go from one duty station to another duty station, and your resume and everything and word of mouth, and people on the other end.
My alphas, they see,
Yeah, so it speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Here, I have my resume. I have a list of all the things that I've done, but you haven't done them at the new district.
Right.
And so that part is hard because it's like you get going and then you have to uproot and move again. And like, for example, when we moved to the Dominican Republic, there's no public schools. There's only international private schools there. But after the breast cancer, remember you telling me you're not going back to the classroom. It's too stressful. You don't need that stress. You were adamant about that. And
put my foot down.
I remember you telling me what you love doing is killing you and you can't do this anymore. So I said, okay. So I remember I interviewed for that job on the phone right after my surgery, and with 8 people on the phone. And I got hired over the phone. So when we landed in the Dominican Republic, I had a job already. And that was an amazing experience. It was different. It was the world of the State Department and embassy. But that was by far the most fun job I ever held. But I still kind of had my hand in education as a school liaison.
Yeah, but you were more or less like almost an inspector of the academic institutions that were providing services to the embassy children.
I was the bridge. I was the bridge between.
But you could identify whether or not there was actual learning going on that those kids needed.
Well, in each private school, because we had a long list of international schools that were available there in Santo Domingo, and our boys, they went to the Carol Morgan International School, because for us that was the best match for our boys. I remember families incoming would say, well, what school do your kids go to? And I was really hesitant to tell them that, because I would always say, well, I'll tell you, but you need to know that may not be the best match for your child. You really need to come and figure out. And I remember telling them, we're very lucky that we get to pick and find the best match for our children here. And we should take advantage of that. And don't just send your child where everybody else is sending their child. You have a choice here, which, in the States, sometimes you don't have a choice.
That's true.
So I was always trying to put a positive spin on it, because it is a hardship post for the State Department. They have it documented. But I tell them Carol Morgan, and they're like, oh, well, maybe my child should go there. I said, well, you need to go and visit the school. And I remember I would try to go visit the schools as much as possible so that I could give some insight on that school. So if a parent would say, well, my child has this need or this gift or this talent, I could say, well, maybe this school might be a good fit. So I still kind of had my hand in education in that aspect. I loved going to visit the schools and talking to the headmasters. They weren't principals, they were headmasters there, and working with the staff, and that part was fun, still having my hand in education. But the other part of that job was welcoming new spouses and new families, because employment was also a huge issue there, because they could only work either at the international schools, if they were, teachers, or at the embassy. And the jobs at the embassy were far and few between. And a lot of times the jobs at the embassy were like entry-level type jobs. And some of these spouses were highly educated. And so they're overqualified, you know? So it's a humbling experience when you have to take a job that you're qualified for, and but you need a job.
Right.
And I remember so as the community liaison officer at the embassy, I sat in on all spousal interviews and veteran interviews. As the CLO, I was to sit in and make sure that I didn't ask questions and I didn't score or rate for hiring. So I had nothing to do with the hiring, but I sat in to make sure that the questions were fair and equitable and all interviews were conducted fairly. So my input did not sway it at all, but I remember spouses coming to my office and I would help them with their resumes and prep them with questions and kind of do little mock interviews with them to help them prepare. So I did see that part. I saw spouses, had never been out of the country before, out of the United States, and they didn't speak the language. It's a different culture. And these weren't just military spouses. This is State Department spouses. So the spousal employment is not just, I think, just a military spouse issue. I think it's a problem in the State Department too. I mean, you have these young foreign service officers that take their spouses to countries all over the world. And spousal employment is an issue, not just confined to the military. Any agency that takes their employee and their family and puts them in a different country, this is gonna be an issue. And it can eventually impact the marriage. I just had a conversation with another Marine spouse on Friday here at the house. She's a nurse. She's like, I haven't worked since we got here in July and I'm going crazy. She says, and my husband seems to think it's just so easy. Can you just transfer from one health organization to another? It doesn't work that way, And she says, I want to work. She says, that's because it's my passion. It's my calling. So it's not just a job for me. And I think that's the hard part is that she says, and she told me, she goes, that's why I got involved in the Okinawa International Women's Club. And I'm volunteering and I'm doing these cultural exchanges and I'm venturing out because if not, I would go stir crazy at home with nothing to do, with no purpose.
Right.
Not saying that she doesn't have a purpose here, with her kids, but your own personal growth, your own.
Right.
That's hard and you have spouses that have gone through 3 or 4 careers or different passions just to trying to figure out their niche, and here at Okinawa, there are some amazing spouses that take beautiful photos. They're photographers. You've got spouses that do hair and makeup, which are in high demand during ball season, and they're talented. And then you've got spouses that there's a whole bunch of spouses that are certified doulas. Who knew that would be a high demand here in Okinawa, Japan. Photography, hair, makeup, nails, it's hard because also. Shout
out to Lynn for keeping my baby's toes looking pretty.
Yes. Because when you move, you have to find a new hairdresser. Any woman knows that that's huge to trust someone with your hair. You don't just go to anybody. And you're very picky about who cuts your hair now.
Yeah, I
so
kind of spoiled by the chop shop.
So everything has to start all over again. in the States who's...
But it's not all doom and gloom, though, right?
No, it's not all doom and gloom. No, but I'm just saying this, it's not just the statistics and the financial burden. It's also the emotional and the morale that gets hit too. And the resentment,
Resentment.
Yes, the resentment towards the active duty.
You resent me?
At times, I have to be honest. And I was talking to a spouse on Friday, and I said, and the resentment, and her eyes lit up. She goes, yes. She goes, no one's ever said that out loud. And I said, it's okay. You can say that. You're human. You're going to feel that, I was going to say anger, but frustration, because I said, it's their fault. And she goes, yes, it is. And I was like, but we don't mean it like their fault in a like ugly, but it is. It's because of them that we have to uproot ourselves, and we can't fully fulfill our path, our career, our plan, our passion, because we're moving so often.
And I'm going to say this because I know I'm outside arm's reach, but I mean, you signed up for this, right?
Yes and no. You signed up. You signed the papers.
Yeah, but you signed the papers.
We signed the marriage certificate. Yes, I get that. You signed up for it, and you get that a lot. Well, you knew what you were getting into. You don't know what you're getting into. You don't have any idea as a military spouse when you get married and you move and move and move. You have no idea, because every move is different. Every duty station is different with different challenges. And there's good in that. It comes from that. The positive side of it is that you learn to be flexible. You learn to be adaptable. You learn to get involved. You learn to appreciate your community and your network, and you learn things along the way that don't necessarily make every move easy, but it makes it easier because you gather tools with each move that makes your move easier.
So give me an example. What's one of the tools that you go to first?
First is you prep like 20 resumes and you have them ready to go. I just looked at my Google Drive the other day, and I must have like 30 different resumes for 30 different types of jobs. And cover letters, because every resume and every cover letter has to be different. And that I learned when we left the Dominican Republic and moved back to San Antonio. We moved back in December, 1st of December. Nobody's hiring a teacher mid-year. So you're kind of like, that's a hard spot, because we've always moved in the summertime.
Right.
This was the first time we moved mid-school year. Well, the second time, moving to the DR, we moved, but I already had a job, so it's different. So I had never not worked for that long period of time and didn't have anything to do. And I remember I was trying, like you were hoping I would not go back into the classroom. So I was really trying to apply for jobs outside of the school district. So I remember that's when I learned that I had to definitely change my resume and cover letter. It was different because when you're going into education, it's kind of the same goal.
We're trying to get you working the IC, right? At that point in time, in the intelligence community.
Yeah.
Working as a language instructor, potentially.
Yeah, we tried all kinds of things. And I remember telling you I'm going to have to go back into the classroom. And I remember you put your head down. You're like, ugh, fine.
I'm just tired of buying other people's kids' pencils. Just kidding.
And I had given away all my classroom stuff, remember? I had given all of my classroom.
She doesn't let it go.
No. And so I had I think it cost.
All right. Truth be told, I convinced Elizabeth to give away a significant amount of her classroom resources to teachers who really needed it, and probably still putting them to good use to this day. But she no longer has them. And so I've had to slowly but surely watched the bank account dwindle as she kind of replenished her resources. So you got to upgrade. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I think to just that first year when I taught, I think I spent just close to $1,000 just getting my classroom up and going, just up again. And but changing your resume, definitely, and that was something I hadn't thought about before, and that's when I started figuring out that there's different military spouse blogs out there that talk about your resumes and how to change your resumes and make it fit. So that's when I started reading about, okay, what do I need to do as a military spouse to make myself marketable? And then I was bored, and I was depressed. I was in the house. I wasn't doing anything, and I wasn't making money. And, we had just left the Dominican Republic where we were very busy and social, and I was involved, to doing nothing was a huge change. And that's when I got involved with Blue Star Families. And they said, we need a chapter director. And I remember I asked back in the email, does this pay anything? And they said, no, it's strictly volunteer. We don't have a chapter director in San Antonio. You would be the first one. There's 5 military installations, so you would be the liaison between the installations, the community. I said, well, this sounds great. Sounds like fun. Okay, where do I sign up? I'm bored. I'm not working. I might as well do something. Bored. I was bored, and I was getting depressed. And so that's how I got started. And then I got hired. I got a job. So I only really did Blue Star Family Chapter Director for about a year and a half. Then we left San Antonio. But for the first few months, it was just getting it up off the ground, going. Did a few events at the Texans Museum. We did events at the Lackland Youth Center, Air Force Base Youth Center, with the books on bases. Remember, we had that huge pallet of like 1,200 books delivered to the house?
Don't I ever.
We did a couple of Blue Star Families as a program, the Caregivers program. We did a couple of those and worked closely with the USO there in San Antonio. So we were just starting to get going when I went to work full time. And at that point, I would end up having to take a day off of work to go do volunteer work, for the day in different schools around San Antonio. And then when we left, I passed the baton to this fabulous lady, Robin Johnson, that she took it over, and she just took off with it. And she was retired Army, and she did
I remember her. She gave me a good vibe when we met her.
Yes, she did a fabulous job, and she really got the Blue Star Families chapter going and off the ground in San Antonio. And she did an amazing work with that. I'm sad that I didn't get to really do more with it. And that was another thing I've learned, is to volunteer, get involved. And a lot of spouses don't realize that volunteering can go on your resume. That's another thing I learned. Especially if you're like PTO president, put that on your resume. That counts. All those skills transfer to a paying job. If you ran book drives at the school, or if you volunteered at the hospital, you volunteer with different charities. A lot of spouses don't see that as worthy enough to put on a resume, but I definitely found out that that's definitely something to put on a resume. I mean, you didn't get paid for it, but it doesn't mean you still didn't accomplish something or still didn't use a set skills to do those things. But, I mean, it hasn't been all bad.
What do you like about the military life?
Meeting new people.
Distance from the family?
No. Well, I think we've been away from the family for so long. We have a certain lifestyle and way we do things it's different. I mean, I miss the family, but I like meeting new people. I like discovering, especially being this is our second time overseas. It's new cultures, traveling. Definitely have the travel bug now. Where here I thought I was going to live my life till the last days of my life in Galveston. I never dreamed that we would have traveled to other countries. It just didn't occur to me that was a possibility. And getting involved. And I think the place where we really got involved was in San Angelo, because you were not deployable there. So we were able to really make
Scouts, soccer, church.
I mean,
classes.
we got really involved because you weren't gone all the time. So there was two of us to tag team out the boys' sports and the boys' activities. And that's where we really, really did get involved with the Scouts and the church. And I think that's why the boys feel a connection to San Angelo. They always talk about, we should go back there. We liked it.
Both boys?
Enrique more so than Vicente. I think Enrique really enjoyed it.
Vicente thinks home is San Antonio.
Yeah, for Vicente, home is San Antonio. But that's where we really
It's interesting because he was about the same age as Enrique was in San Angelo.
Yes. I think that's about the time where they start to kind of want to be in one place, maybe. I don't know. But I think that's where we really started to give back and started to really and figure out this is what you do. You give back to the community that you're involved in. You leave it better than what you found it. You know, you not better than what you found it, but you add to it.
Right.
And you
put down roots.
Put down roots. I mean, but we did that. I don't know if you remember when we were in Monterey, California.
Yeah.
When I was teaching and you brought the Marines.
We had that reading program.
Yeah, we had that reading
Snipes
program.
and Shantz and
Pedro
Rodriguez and Wasserman and Sutton and Reed.
Esparza. Yeah, I mean.
Who let Esparza read books to kids?
But you brought the kids over. I mean, there were kids, you know, the Marines that were just waiting, you know.
Waiting training.
Yeah. Over, and we'd have reading buddies. And I remember those kids just eyes would light up because you guys would come over in your uniform and read. And
looking fabulous in our chucks.
I think that was the first time as a married couple that we did something together to give back to like the local community was that.
Yeah.
And that was also when we started the tradition of having the Marines over for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Because there were so many of them that this was their first time away from home that you know, some of them couldn't afford to go home or they had class and so they couldn't be gone for that long because they had to be in class for so many days and hours. And I remember we cooked.
For everybody.
And I remember Enrique was 3 or 4 weeks old. And we had family in town. Your dad and Maria and Melanie and my mom and my dad came to meet Enrique. And I remember we cooked a Thanksgiving meal and I cooked with Enrique in a little baby pouch carrier in the kitchen.
I remember that.
So, yeah, we cooked. We cooked for them all. And I think that's when we started the tradition of cooking for all the Marines. And that's when we realized there was a need for that, to give a place for the Marines to feel like they were home. I think that time in California is when we kind of started to do things like that together. And then when we got to San Angelo is when we really were able to get involved and give back
Because we didn't have time to do that in North Carolina.
No, you were never home. You were home, but you weren't home. You worked long hours. You didn't know when you were going to come home for dinner. And I remember that's when I realized this is on me. I've got to figure this out. Not that I couldn't rely on you, but I couldn't rely on you, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember a lot of the military spouses I worked with were really like, this is just the way it is here. This is the lifestyle here. And that was, I think, my very first real experience as a Marine wife, what it meant to be a Marine wife, because you were gone and your hours and your schedule was unpredictable. And this is when I really learned that I had to have a support network.
Yeah.
And that is key, is to make sure you establish who's your go-to person. Who's going to be the person that's going to have your back, or who's going to be the person that's going to come and take care of your kids because you have the flu? Who's going to come and take your kids to school?
Thank God we had Jolene and Gina and
it was Jolene and Gina in that neighborhood that really were like our family. And you learn that family isn't just blood.
Yeah. Yeah, I still tell quite a few people that one of the most formative mentors that I had, or most influential mentors that I had, was Gunner Beecher. The fact that I had a legitimate bursting bomb gunner living in my cul-de-sac, and the only thing I had to do was walk over with a 6-pack of Coors Light, or not even sometimes, and just pick his brain and ask him all things infantry, really shaped my perspective as a signals intelligence guy, as it pertains to how to integrate with the infantry. But while he was doing that for me, you had his wife Gina and Jolene and other spouses in that cul-de-sac that were kind of teaching you some of the same things, but just from a different perspective. Like how do you make a life in this organization, and not lose, your identity, hold true to your values and principles.
Yeah.
Because if you're not careful, it'll break you.
And then in turn, it will affect your marriage, because you have to. Yeah, because if you let it completely wear you down, then you will resent your spouse. Not the normal resentment, but it will be to a point to where it can affect your marriage and your relationship with your spouse. And not understanding that they're not purposely derailing your career. They're not doing it on purpose. It's not with intent at all. But then also, realizing that in that you develop some skills and talent that you can turn into strengths. You're flexible. You're adaptable. You work well with others. You work well with anybody. Actually, at that point, you figure out how to definitely great interviewers. You go through so many job interviews. You definitely learn how to do some interviews, how to write resumes, cover letters. You learn how to insert yourself into a community, whether it be at your job, at the church, with scouts, with Girl Scouts. And all of those are skills that employers are looking for. I think spouses sometimes look at that as being a negative thing. We move so much. We're never anywhere in one place. They're not going to want to hire me because I might be gone in another year or two. That's discouraging. It's illegal for someone not to hire you because, they're going to be moving, so we don't really want to hire this person.
Good luck proving that.
Yeah. And it's funny because they'll ask you questions to kind of get you to say, well, I'll be leaving, or I don't know how long, they won't directly ask you, but some employers will try to ask you those questions. And it's how you respond and how you can take it and turn it into a positive. Because military spouses do have a lot to give. They do have a lot to offer to any organization. And I think that the resilience that they bring and the adaptability, the flexibility.
How about a willingness to try new things?
A willingness to try new things. Definitely a different perspective. I mean...
And speaking of trying new things, what did you try today?
Oh, God. Jiu-jitsu. It was definitely outside of my comfort zone.
So we didn't put you in the deep end of the pool. We just let you dip your toes in the water. But the boys were amazed.
They were so excited
to see you on the mat.
To get me on the mat. And I don't know if they were excited just to get me on the mat because they wanted to finally choke me out, or they were just, I don't know. I think they were shocked that I got on the mat.
What was difficult about it?
The gi is very uncomfortable.
Well, part of it is the gi that you had on was one of my gis, and it's not fitted for you. So,
but the material's rough.
The material is rough,
and that doesn't move.
So I've got a contact that works at Origin, Maine. Her name is Nicole, and I'm gonna get her to help me fit you perfectly for your own gi.
I want a pink gi.
You want a pink gi?
Hot pink gi.
Hot pink gi.
It was interesting. I have to admit, I did enjoy it a little bit.
Okay. What did you like about it?
I think because I was there with the boys.
That's the best part for me.
I was there with the boys, just watching their faces. Vicente was like, he was like, he enjoyed sweeping me and knocking me on the ground. Yeah. And then he was like, "You're so cuddly. You're fun to roll with." He told me. It was just interesting. I mean, I'll go back next week because it's parents and kids. Well, I won't be the only parent there, but...
Well, you'd never be the only parent there.
I'd never be the only parent, but I mean, it was interesting. That was good. But yeah, definitely willing to try new things. That's definitely something that you have to be able to do, and give, and definitely be able to give back. See where there's a need in the community and get involved and give back. And that's one thing I tell spouses when they're sad and down: get involved. Find a charity, find an organization. Here in Okinawa, you've got the Red Cross that you get involved in, the USO you get involved in, the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. They're always looking for volunteers, and they do so much for our military service members.
You've taken out quite a few loans with them in the past, remember?
Quite a few. I think
maybe at least once or twice.
Once or twice. When we had family emergencies, we had to fly home. And then they've got the schools. The schools are always looking for volunteers to help out in the cafeteria, to help out in the library, just to come in and help the teacher read to kids. Let's have kids read to you. And always everybody's saying, well, how do we volunteer? Where do we volunteer? Well, you can volunteer out in the local community in Okinawa. You can do that. But the schools on base are in need of volunteers. We have a whole committee at our school that just deals with volunteers. That their job is to reach out to get volunteers to help with certain events at our schools. Because we can't do it without the help of the volunteers. And the volunteers, most of them are our parents. Volunteer with our PTO. We have different types of events at night that just, literacy nights, math nights. You need those parents. School dances, walkathons. Schools do all kinds of things. And just, go to the school, see what a teacher needs. Making copies, lamination, bulletin boards, anything. So if you have kids, definitely get involved at your kid's school. And I think that's the first place to start. When you get to a new place, if you have children, go to the school, get involved, insert yourself. And then I would venture out from there, see what the volunteer opportunities are on base. I immediately went to look for the International Women's Club here. I Googled it before I got here because I was so involved with the International Women's Club in the Dominican Republic. And for me, that was a very positive experience where I actually saw all the money that we raised be put to work and what it did and all the good that came from it. And I haven't been able to get as involved here. I donate whenever they're doing, bake sales or bazaar, or they're collecting things to sell, or they're collecting money. If I can't be there, I usually do that because I work here. It's different. My job is different here. But that was one of the places where I started in the church. If you're find a church.
Or the Scouts.
You got Scouts and you got Girl Scouts. Both of those, depending on what your child wants to get involved in. We were rarely involved in Scouts in San Angelo. Kind of got away from that a little bit. And then finally, we're definitely involved with Scouts now.
Yes. Yes.
I had no plans of being a committee chair because I'm so busy with teaching, but have gladly taken that over. Now I'm treasurer too. So, because without the parents, the
programs don't function.
The programs don't function, and our kids need that. Our kids need that.
That positive outlet.
That positive outlet. They need to be involved. They need to keep busy because this is hard for them too.
So let me ask you, if we're closing in on almost an hour and a half, if I could take you back in time to right before I called to ask you to marry me, and to let Liz of today talk to Liz of then, to give her some advice, a heads up, a warning, what would you tell Miss Lopez?
Oh. That's a good question because I hadn't thought about it. What would I do if we had not gotten married? Like, or what advice would I?
I would hope you wouldn't tell her, don't marry him.
Don't do it. No.
Don't do it.
I would say take a moment to take a step back and savor it because it's gone by so fast. That made me cry. I would go back and do it all over again. Because it's been amazing. It's been amazing.
And with that, we're out.